Escaping the cycles of suffering through presence, purification, and God's love. Thank you for joining me, my friends. Today I would like to talk about a foundational lesson or topic that I reference in many of my videos, and it's called the cycles of suffering. We get caught in cycles of suffering. And when we escape these cycles of suffering and gain wisdom from going through them, this gives us the ability to share this experience and this wisdom to help others escape their cycles of suffering. That's why the cycles of suffering is such an important topic, as well as how do we recognize it and address it and deal with it and break free from it. So our lives are pretty much different types of cycles of suffering. Sometimes they're mental, sometimes they're physical, sometimes they're emotional, spiritual, ego, attachment. We get caught in these different cycles of suffering. One of the greatest cycles of suffering is the cycles of thought. And we're going to talk about what are these, we kind of did talk about what are these different types of cycles of suffering. There's many different types of cycles. These are just repeated cycles of different kinds of suffering that we can't seem to identify or get out of. It can be physical. We can have an ongoing physical issue that we can't seem to resolve. And it brings us a type of suffering. We have ongoing mental stress, anxiety, depression, things like this. And we're going to talk about how important it is to utilize presence and purification to escape these cycles, no matter what the different cycle of suffering is. There's many different, and we can identify quite a few just off these cycles of repeated suffering. It could be anything. It could be a physical issue. You have a symptom that you can't seem to figure out. You can't seem to fix it with your body. You could be stuck in thought. You can't calm your mind down enough. Well, we're going to talk about presence and purification and God's love and how we can use these and utilize these as the foundation to escape all cycles of suffering. And this is why we're here. We're here to share this type of information, knowledge, wisdom, whatever you want to call it, with as many people as possible so we can raise humanity out of the shadows and into ascension and into higher divine levels and make this planet a absolute utopia, divine utopia for our cosmic beloved, just sharing the eternal love of our cosmic beloved always and everywhere. Unconditional love for everything and everyone, for all. So that's the idea. That's what happens when we escape these cycles of suffering, because they're suppressive, these cycles of suffering that get, you could say, introduced by certain entities trying to control the energy of humanity. What's interesting is evil sows the seeds of its own destruction. What is so interesting about the cycles of suffering is they are kind of thrust upon us, but by making us go through these cycles of suffering, we're gaining wisdom, and it's actually having the adverse effect that the controllers want on us. They're trying to suppress us and keep our consciousness low, but the suffering actually forces us to change, to break out of the suffering and to gain the wisdom and then be able to evolve and move forward. That's what happened to me. I made a video about how to deal with stressful jobs and how meditation changed my life. I talk about that. So the cycles of suffering I was caught in, let's use myself as an example, as all I can ever do is share my experience and my level of understanding. So I talked a little bit about this in one of my previous videos, but let's talk about a couple different types of cycles of suffering and how I identified them and rose above them. We can talk about my stressful jobs. I had a history of stressful jobs. This was a cycle of suffering for me because it caused me much stress and anxiety and XYZ, and a lot of aggravating activities I was doing was aggravating this cycle of suffering even worse, because everything works together. So we had these diet related things which cause physical issues, which also cause an aggravation of my mind, which also causes overstimulation of certain areas. My adrenals were burned out. I was having too much caffeine, maybe too much junk food. There's so many different areas but a lot of these different areas can work together to cause many different types of cycles of suffering, physical in different areas of our bodies, mental, our thoughts. We cannot stop our thoughts. We have endless stressful situations we create in our mind. We can't facilitate a state of peace, which is what I made another video about. If I can remember, I'll try to link that, about how to get ourselves in a peaceful state to calm the mind so we can come into presence, the divine eternal moment. I am God's eternal love pouring forth. So we can come into that. That's the goal. That's how we recognize the cycles of suffering, and we utilize these things, and we apply these things. This is how we escape the cycles of suffering. This is how I escaped. I was forced to make a change. I started meditating. I started loosening up the suppression through the raising my consciousness through meditation. I started doing the purification to get my chemistry more balanced, to remove some of the acid type aggravators. It's basically all about removing the aggravators. I made the video recognizing and removing the aggravators. I made these videos specifically as a foundational type reference that we can go back to, so it'll be easier when I'm explaining these things in the future. Especially, I talk about the cycles of suffering so much, I wanted to make a specific video explaining what they are, or basically they could be anything that's a perpetual cycle that we can't seem to get out of. But now we're going to identify what could be and what is a cycle of suffering, and how to get out of any of them through presence, purification, and God's love. Presence is God's love. And what are the two of the highest devotions to God? Presence and purification. This is why when we apply these together, we can break free from these cycles of suffering, because it's all part of our attachment to the illusion, our attachment to our egos. That's why we're caught in any of these cycles of suffering. It's our attachment to the sense world, the sense objects. We're getting caught in too many different poles of the world. It's hard not to. We're not blaming anybody. It's not our fault. It's just nature running off, basically. But this is how it works. We get caught in these cycles. We get all these emotional traumas that keep us in various cycles that perpetuate bad habits, or whatever you want to call them, that can suppress us. Eating habits, things we take in, like what we watch and what we listen. So one of the big keys in escaping any cycle of suffering, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, stress, anxiety, depression, which can be physical and otherwise, right? One of the keys to this is standing in the center of the circle, not having attachments, and staying present, right? These are the keys to escaping these cycles of suffering. This is how we can break free from all. And God's love is the present moment, like we were talking about before. So all we have to do is focus on those, presence and purification. And no matter what trap we catch ourselves in, what type of cycle we're in, this will allow us to raise our perspective enough to recognize it and eventually release ourselves from it through gaining balance, facilitating a peaceful state, and recognizing and removing the aggravators. Very important, and escaping the cycles of suffering, because all these things that aggravate and stimulate the mind in the cycles of thought are going to make it very hard to get enough balance and facilitate a peaceful enough state to escape these cycles. We have to do everything in our power, everything we can, or seemingly in control can, whatever, however you want to look at it, to create this balance and create this peaceful state. And this is how we escape all cycles of suffering. This is a very condensed version of what are the cycles of suffering and how to escape. And basically all of my videos are applying this and dissecting this and wrapping our minds around this from different angles. That's basically what all my different videos are. I'm taking different angles of where we can get caught up in the game, or what gets us caught in cycles of suffering and how to escape them. All the different ways, all the different ego traps, all the different attachments. What happens when we get sucked in this way or that way? Well, no matter how you look at it, usually we're always coming back to the same spot. That's why we just need that constant reminder. Like I talked about in my last video, we need to be constantly reminded. I need to constantly remind myself, don't think, stay present. We don't need to think. It's a trap of the game. It's just a program we're basically children. We're basically these heavily programmed children that have grown up and now are trying to reevaluate and deactivate our old programming. That's basically what we're doing as adults, and as we go through cycles of suffering and realize all these programmings are making things more difficult and keeping us trapped in these programs until we break free from them, like obligation thing, feeling obligated, and shame and guilt and regret, until we can. What can be really helpful is is taking a higher perspective to these things. This will help us break free from these attachments and these feelings and these emotional bricks that can hold us down. Feeling shame for something that we did in the past. We were never going to do anything else other than what we did. If we gave someone bad advice and they say, wow, man, he did what I told him, but it didn't turn out good. Now I feel bad. It's like, it's hard. It's a trap. It's hard not to get caught in it because we all do it. At some level or some point, we get caught. We're like, oh, I'm going to get caught. And until we recognize it, the faster we're practicing recognizing where we're getting caught in the game faster. That's what happens with practice. And eventually, we'll stop getting caught. We'll recognize it so quickly. And eventually, we'll be like, I don't need to recognize anymore. I'm going to stop getting caught here. I'm going to stop getting caught here. It's a practice. So the faster you can recognize it and stay more present and be the observer and recognize these cycles or these traps, the more smoothly you will evolve out of them. So this is all very important. And getting to the point of trying not to judge ourselves for anything, not judging ourselves for anything, and accepting where we are. So if we're caught, and we're always caught in some cycle or another. Some of them are more severe than others. Some of them are less severe because we tend to judge ourselves more harshly, especially when we're on a spiritual awakening journey like this one. And again, God's love. I say presence, purification, and God's love? Because God's love is everything. We want to surrender to God's love. I am God's eternal love pouring forth. And while we're in the divine present moment, that is when everything breaks free. That is when we're breaking free from the illusion. And the more we can do that, the more we practice that presence, we're just on a gradual arc of escaping all of our cycles of suffering and finding balance. It's a journey. So relax, take your time. Don't worry about how long is this going to take. How long does this take? For me, I know detoxification can take a long time. It can take decades even, because if we spend our whole lifetime eating the wrong foods and congesting our bodies, it can take a long time to clean it out. It's not going to be quick. But I've come to the complete, I'm completely committed to what I'm doing. It's not about time. You're staying present in the second by second present moment of your unfolding process of your awakening. That's basically what we're doing. So no matter the physical condition of our body, which we had no control over, the conditioning and the programming we were given to allow them to be end up in this state where we find them sometimes in not such good condition. And now we have to evolve ourselves and heighten our perspectives to now try to reverse this and heal them. But what a blessing it is to receive such a higher perspective. What a blessing it is to receive these higher perspectives. And remember, this was going to be a separate video, but it feels like a good place to insert it is the divine is always trying to send us these profound messages like presence is key, purification, stand in the center of the circle. It's always trying to send us these messages constantly. But what we do is inadvertently block these messages through these programs and traps we get caught in the sense world, in the material world. So basically removing the aggravators and because all these things are trying to incite chaos in the mind so you don't stop thinking, because they know when you stop thinking you're in the divine eternal moment. So that's why removing the aggravators is so important. It always comes back to removing the aggravators, getting that balance. Because then the more we quiet the mind, the easier and the more we can receive these messages from the divine that can guide us, to being more and more present with the Creator. Because again, two of the greatest devotions to God are purification of the body and remaining present, because that is complete surrender. Staying present is complete surrender to God's love, to everything, and purifying the body is a blessing from God. This is a temple of God, from God. So we are showing devotion, the highest devotion. Those are two of the highest devotions. That's why they are foundations, purification and presence. They are foundations to escaping the cycles of suffering. No matter what cycle of suffering I talk about, I always end up at the same foundations, standing at the center of the circle. I just made a video on that as well. A very important concept from the Tao Te Ching that allows us to observe without attachment or bias, so we don't get caught in any of those traps. Because as soon as you I have a lot of videos I've made about these subjects. If I can remember them all, I'll list them for you guys. But anyway, if you check out my catalog, please, if you're enjoying these videos, I am so grateful, because I am here for you. I'm here as a reminder for myself. I'm here as a reminder for you, just sharing this eternal present moment with you of God's love. I appreciate you immensely. Thank you for joining me. This is the cycles of suffering in a nutshell. Again, eventually I'm going to write a book on it, and it will be probably pretty extensive, because I'm going to take a lot of these angles that I approach these things in some of my videos and try to elaborate on them and make it as easily understandable as possible. That's one reason I'm speaking about these things and making these videos, is I know some of them can be tricky to deal with, and I had trouble dealing with them and digesting them and understanding them and applying them. So it was always helpful to me if I could find someone to make things simpler or try to explain them in a different way. That's all. We just sometimes, again, this is why we need to come at these things from many, many different angles. We need to try to help explain these cycles we're caught in. We need to try to help explain how we get out of any of them. And we have to do it from as many different angles as possible, because we are here to be the example. We are here to set the world free, to set free humanity, to raise the conscious of humanity. Each single one of us is very powerful. Never underestimate your power. You sharing your example, your wisdom you've gained from escaping a cycle of suffering, and with just one person, could make an absolutely profound difference, because we know how powerful just one person can be and how much change and influence they can have on the world. So if we can take our wisdom, it is through suffering we grow closer to God. It is through suffering we gain wisdom, and it is through wisdom we gain the ability to help others with their suffering. It is through this we are going to liberate humanity. Sharing this wisdom is one of the greatest things we could do. And again, helping one person can have a profound impact on the world because we're all capable of enormous things. So never underestimate the power of your story and your experience and your point of view or your perspective. If it's helping you, if you have some understanding you wish you had, that's why I'm making these videos. I'm trying to remind us and reteach things that I wish I understood better or was able to understand from maybe an earlier time, or would have benefited from this type of explanation at an earlier time. Now, I know it's still, some of this stuff's still going to might be difficult for some to understand because they may not be familiar with some of the concepts that I'm talking about. And some of them are kind of new that I've kind of, they're not new in the type of concept they are. There's very similar ones or probably the same that are called something different, but I'm just kind of taking my own spin on it and from how I can see it. So these are the cycles of suffering as I've kind of envisioned them, right? And this is how we get out of them. Well, we all know purification and presence and God's love. Just surrendering completely. That's why it's presence, purification, and God's love to get out of these cycles of suffering. Because God's love is the answer to all. His eternal, unconditional love. Because that's what we are. We are basically getting to the point where we can surrender completely to being God's love. And then we are filling our cup to the top and overflowing. And that's when we're helping others. We got to remove the plank from our own eye to take the speck out of our brother's eye. What a beautiful day this has been. I hope your day has been beautiful too, my friends. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions or you'd like just to say hi, please feel free to drop a comment. I have many, many videos on the docket. The divine, last night while meditating, blessed me with quite a bit of divine inspiration, being quite encouraging as to me making these videos. And I'm just overwhelmed by the kindness and the love I've been receiving from some of my dear friends in the comments and how much these videos relate to your experience. And I love hearing about your experiences because we all have something to share. We all have something that can be helpful to others. We can learn something from everybody, no matter where they're at, because we all have very unique perspectives and experiences. None of us have experienced exactly the same life. We all know that. We all had slightly different angles, so we all have something a little bit different to offer. Like, oh, you've been looking at it from your angle, but I've been looking at it from my angle. And I got this little thing that I learned that helped me tremendously. And that's kind of what I'm doing as well. I'm sharing some things that some people may not be familiar with that may be able to help them on their journey. Because there's so many different tools. There's so many different things. Like, it's also important not to get caught up in too many different practices. You don't want to overwhelm yourself because there's a lot of different types of yoga, a lot of different types of meditation. Find something that resonates with you the best it can. And you don't have to be attached to any of it. That's what's great about it. We're doing it without attachment. Just do it if your intuition feels like it or you feel like doing it. And if it's not working, try to do something else. You got no attachment. There's no rules. It's all exactly what you're going to do anyway. If you're going to try 20 different types of meditation before you found one that you liked or before the universe gave you a specific one, who cares? That's all what was going to happen anyway. There's no rush. It's hard not to be in a rush all the time. Well, this video kind of just keeps going. See, I can talk forever. If I don't put my 10-minute limit on it, you guys probably know by now I can keep going. You know what I mean? I keep reminding myself when we experience impatience, lack of presence breeds impatience. It's so being patient with the journey and what we're going through. It can be tricky because of our programs, and we think we need to go be somewhere and do something. We're someone doing something on time. Well, there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to be except for right here, right now. That's the only place we could possibly be. This journey is wild. Thank you for joining me. I have many other videos planned. I have quite a list. I have the burden of chemistry, parts 2 and 3. I mean, there's a lot to say there. I can do other burden videos. If you guys are interested, please let me know. Please leave any feedback. I'd love to hear it. What else? I have so many videos planned. I have some other foundational, this was the foundational type videos planned that I'm going to do as well, because I'm going to create a kind of sort of foundational series about some of the concepts I talk about. So when I refer to them, we can have a playlist of these foundational things like facilitating a peaceful state and removing the aggravators, the cycles of suffering, things like this. And there's so many of these very important things. I can make a specific video on how important purification is, and regenerative detoxification, which is how we allow the body to cleanse and heal. So I'm going to make all these videos transitioning a diet, because the purification is so important, and it can be daunting if we don't know, if we're not experienced with it, or we hear advice from so many different places. So I'm going to do my best to simplify these things and make them as easily digestible as I can, because I know how difficult this path can be. I've had a pretty difficult path, which is interesting because it was on purpose, and I'm not mad at how difficult my path has been. I've been caught in many different cycles of suffering: physical cycles of suffering, mental, thought, ego, attachment cycles of suffering, identifying with the actor cycles of suffering, the ego, getting caught in other people's melodramas, cycles of suffering. The list goes on forever. There's many different cycles. So I'm speaking out of my experience from these, and through my personal journey, how I came to these concepts and conclusions, and what has helped me. And again, as we keep standing in the center of the circle and raising our perspectives, we're able to see more and more of these things more easily. They come to me more easily now, and things just kind of work themselves out in how I'm seeing things by focusing on the presence and purification. So thank you for joining me again. I know I've tried to end this video 3 times. There's a lot to talk about. And remember, everything's connected. This is why I can make these 10-minute videos about any subject, really, because you're starting over here. And what do we say about the cycles of suffering? How many times have I said that this video? The answer is always the same. No matter where you start, oh, I'm caught in this cycle. I'm caught in this cycle. I'm caught in this cycle. Well, this is what we're going to do. We got to stand in the center of the circle. We got to cut those attachments. We got to remove the aggravators. We got to facilitate a state of peace. We got to recognize what's not working in the diet, which is actually aggravating us, and clean up the diet and eat more raw, living foods. We need to do all these things together to break free. And we can do it. That's why we're here. I am so happy to hear from so many of you. Thank you for joining me. You've got this. You can do this. I came from some very deep states of cycles of suffering, and through my devotion to this path, the only path there is of presence and purification, God's love, you will gradually work yourself out of any trouble you're in. All we have to do is let it all go and surrender, and not judge ourselves, accept ourselves exactly where we are, because we're in the perfect spot. Namaste.